The Jaywalkers Recovery Podcast is meant to provide support and inspiration for those on a journey of recovery. We are not affiliated with any specific 12-step groups. Our goal is to share personal experiences and insights that may be helpful to listeners in their own recovery process. Please consult with a healthcare professional or therapist for personalized advice and guidance. Thank you for listening and welcome to the Jaywalkers Recovery Podcast. This is Kevin with the Jaywalkers Recovery Podcast. Today in the studio, I have with me a very good friend of mine from my home group named Elias P. And Elias's sobriety date is 8/15/09 with 14 years of sobriety. What's up, Elias?
How's it going, Kevin?
Oh, man, it's so good to have you in the studio today. I really was thinking in our home group members who I'd like to have in, and I'm like, Elias is such a good speaker, and I was like, I've never heard your full story today, so I'm really excited to get to hear it today.
I definitely appreciate the opportunity. There are days I can talk, and there are days that I'm a fumbling idiot, so we'll see which one.
We'll see which one comes out today. Yeah, you know what? I think it's going to come out just fine. And, why don't you start off? You could talk a little bit about early days or the first time you used. Just take us on a journey of your story and start from the top. What was it like?
My name is Elias P. I am an alcoholic, a drug addict, a gambling addict, a sex addict, a fishing addict, a hunting addict, an addict of anything that feels good, anything in the world. I'm not sure there's any good feeling I can't become addicted to in a flash. I heard one time that 80% of life is boredom, 10% is pleasure, and 10% is pain, and you'd think the pain was the part I was terrified of, but I think it's actually the 80% of boredom. Fear is the number one offender for me. I am afraid of being bored. I am afraid of being insane. Anything that feels good, including pain, sometimes can distract me, and I will latch onto it. I think that I was born this way. I hear a lot of stories from people who have excellent reasons to become alcoholics and drug addicts. I'm not one of those. External things do not make you an addict or an alcoholic, just like external things don't get you sober. I grew up in a wonderful home. My dad is a physician. My mom has a master's of divinity. She's an ordained Baptist minister, although she doesn't work in a church anymore. They did not spoil me, much to my chagrin. They don't drink. Dad could probably count the number of drinks he's had on one hand. Mom has never drank alcohol in her life. They've never slept with anybody but each other. I'm not even sure they ever dated anybody but each other. They've never tried a cigarette, a joint. They're the most spiritually mature, responsible people I can imagine, and they spawned me. And I was just born with a sickness. My very first memory, I think it's my first memory, I was on a swing set and there was big bushes behind me. And I remember having this overwhelming sense of terror that there was something back there. I lived in Oklahoma at the time and I thought it was a bear. And I was probably 3 or 4 years old, so didn't really understand about bears and territories and all that. But I remember taking off out of that swing like a bat out of hell. I was just terrified. And that terror really played a role. It changed over time, but I never lost that sense of fear, that sense of something isn't right. AA talks about restless, irritable, and discontent, and I relate to that on so many levels. I didn't have a lot of problems growing up. I didn't have a tough time making friends. My parents tried real hard not to spoil me, so I always felt like I didn't fit in. And like clothing wise, what all the people were wearing. My parents had the money to buy me a Nike shirt. They just refused on principle. They grew up poor, and they didn't want a spoiled brat. And they probably did me a lot of favors in hindsight, but I just never felt like I was quite there. I probably could have had that shirt or those jeans and still not felt that way. It probably really didn't matter at all. Actually, my first experimentation, I would say, it wasn't alcohol. It was the dawn of the internet and pornography. That was the first time I ever really grasped like an outside emotional intervention. Like, I do this and I get this result. I get this relief. And back then in dial-up internet days, that was a game unto itself for the older people in the crowd who can remember the sound, the ding, 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 like waiting on the dial-up to come up, and it was a sickness all unto itself. I'm actually grateful for drugs and alcohol because I don't know what kind of perverse behaviors I would have gotten into without a different outlet. But the first time I drank, like so many people talk about, just a sense of utter relief, like there was a monkey on my back that was gone, just removed, like it was grabbed by the nape of its neck and thrown away. It was the absence of fear, the absence of caring what you thought about me, what anybody thought about me. It was the freedom to be who I was. That was all more impressive to me than the wooziness or the good feeling. It was just the relief that I don't have to be out, I don't have to be thinking two steps ahead. My mind doesn't have to spin and spin and spin. And I knew when I had that drink the first time that my parents were wrong, that if they only knew what alcohol felt like, they would do it too. It was utterly insane to me that they had lived this monastic type life, basically, and they didn't know what they were missing out on. I didn't have a lot of consequences initially. I don't know how old I was. I've lied about it so many times that I really have no idea. Maybe I was 13, 14, 12. I couldn't tell you. I remember I really wanted to get hooked on cigarettes because I'm a flippin' idiot. And I remember smoking on my roof, climbing out my window and smoking on my roof. I filled the gutter with puke. And I thought that was awesome. And that I was, and I knew I was going to do it again, even though I felt like absolute shit. Like I just, anything to make me feel other than the way I felt. I remember huffing gasoline in my bedroom thinking that that was at like 13 years old, just trying to feel a different way. This is all introspective things I've realized. I didn't have any idea back then. I was just a kid who didn't like the way he felt and was going to do anything he could do, whether porn, alcohol, whatever. They started treating ADHD or ADD when I was early in high school. And it was really the beginning of the problems for me. I got in trouble selling them at school. I was a flippin' idiot. I think I probably exchanged pills with this dude in front of 30 people and didn't think twice about it. So I got expelled. And actually earlier that year, I got suspended from a football game for drinking orange juice and vodka in a clear Dr. Pepper bottle. That's the level of idiocy I got. I was running around wasted with orange juice and vodka in a Dr. Pepper bottle. And yet, I didn't have the shame that I was doing something wrong then. Certainly my parents were livid. They had no idea what was going on. We actually moved from Kansas to North Dakota the summer after I got suspended and then expelled. I got dropped out of soccer, which I had played for 10 years. Things just got put into overdrive. When I got to North Dakota, I got addicted to Oxycontin. And I remember starting on like 10 milligrams, throwing up out of the side of my buddy's Jeep with a big smile on my face, itching like I couldn't believe, and this is the best feeling in the world. And I got to a point where I just could not function without some chemical. I started smoking pot, 12, 15 times a day. Like I had no fingerprint on my right thumb from pressing it into a pipe. It became like drinking water. I mean, I got to the point where I had to drink. I knew this crazy guy across the river, and I mean, he was nuts. He was probably like I was 6 years later, who would buy me 2 Old English high-gravity 40s. And that stuff is like malt liquor. It takes a few seconds for it to come out of the bottle when you tip it upside down. And I had to drink 2 of those every single night to fall asleep. Like I just started to develop this fear. I couldn't, sleeplessness is a problem for a lot of people, and it drove me absolutely insane. It just, I don't know, in hindsight, it just spiraled so quickly. That was my mission in life, was to avoid that fear, that boredom. It wasn't even pain. I didn't have anything that was particularly painful in my life. I just hated who I was and the way I felt. It got worse. It always gets worse. I never was going to shoot up. And then I met this beautiful, bombshell girl who happened to cook meth and shoot dope. And I remember I hated it about her, and we fought about it. I said, I called her all kinds of things. And then one night, she's doing it, and I'm sitting there on the carpet trying to put a needle in my foot, just scared out of my mind. 2 weeks later, I can hit myself, no problem. And that started a love affair deeper than anything I had experienced up to that point. I got put into my first treatment at 17. I went to Hazelden. It was a no expenses spared, fully paid trip to a 4-star resort. And I think what happens the first time, at least for me, when I went to treatment for the first time, I didn't have any shame up to that point in what I was doing. I didn't have any guilt. I just thought everybody else was wrong, and if they only knew. But when you get put in treatment, at least when I got put in treatment for my first time, it opened my eyes, and I was like, whoa, I'm out of control. It was a stopping point. It was that spin drive for me to realize I wasn't ready to get sober, but it added that element to guilt and shame that really killed the buzz for me. And it became about running. I had been a jogger up to that point. I was a sprinter when I got out of there. Started dealing drugs. I met some guys that, it was that type of treatment center. It was the youth, Hazelden, and I met people I probably had no business meeting. And by the time I was 19, I got arrested for selling cocaine. I got a guy on a wire. A couple times, sold him a 1/4 ounce. And one of the most shameful things I ever did in my life, and one of the things that almost kept me from getting sober, I wore a wire on a guy when this all went down. I was spun, and I was still with this girl. She's the only person that knew about it. They told me, if you just wear a wire on your dealer, this guy I didn't know from Seattle. I only knew his first name. They're like, then we'll make all this go away, and you can go back to doing whatever you want to do. And I agonized over it. And for people who aren't alcoholics or really who aren't addicts, it's hard to understand what doing that does to you, how it throws you out of the only community you understand, the only community you belong to, like your credentials, essentially, for that lifestyle, or that you're not a rat. And I wore a wire on that guy, and I didn't know him very well. I actually met him through a guy who went to prison, and I justified it like that. And ultimately now, I'm not sure it was the worst thing I could have done, but at the time, I just felt such guilt and shame. And actually, the cops double-crossed me, still charged me with everything, did it off the paperwork, and screwed me on the whole thing anyways. And then they wanted me to do it to a bunch of my buddies. And I'm like, no, fuck off. And so they put me in jail. They buried all that stuff, the thing I had done that was supposed to get me off the hook. Cops do what cops do, addicts do what addicts do. But I ended up in jail anyways with felonies for delivery of cocaine that I finally got sealed last year after 14 years sober. And I was withdrawing from Oxycontin and meth, and it was just an absolute freaking nightmare. The next 4 years, I got sober at 23. I was 19 when I went into jail. I went to a place called Teen Challenge, which is a Christian treatment center in Mandan, North Dakota. Spent 13 months there, was pretty well cured of religion, although I gave it a go. But the next 4 years are not even worth talking about. They were just it talks about incomprehensible demoralization. I went to 8 total treatments from 17 to 23, or 7 halfway houses, treatment centers, whatever. And when I finally got sober, it was not the sickest I'd been. It was not the most trouble I had been in. But it was the most tired I had ever been. I was absolutely exhausted. I got a buddy that I was rolling with at that point in time, and he was like my mirror image. And we were burglarizing houses. We had closed down the bar. It'd probably been up 3 or 4 days. And we kicked down this door. We thought the people were at their lake home and kicked down this door, and there's a lady on the other side, and she screamed, and we split up, and within, it seemed like seconds, there was cops everywhere, and we were in a subdivision way out of town, and we went different directions, and I got away that night, and he didn't get away. My car didn't get away. It got impounded. Long story short, he took the rap for that, went to prison. I got in trouble. My PO drug tested me, and I peed hot, and got put in a halfway house, but my buddy took the rap, essentially, for the burglary and a whole lot of other stuff we had been up to. He is now in prison for the 5th time since I got sober. And it's just like a tale of two, of two paths. I experienced the miracle of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and turned my life around, and he has made the other decision, and he's doing his 5th stint. And I am grateful for the opportunity that he gave me by taking that. And I pray every day he gets sober. He has 3 little boys. I have 3 kids also. And I could be right there. I could be right there very easily. So I got put in this halfway house. And I'm desperate. I had been to AA meetings before. In fact, my first AA meeting was at 17 years old. It was actually, I'm going to divert a little bit. It was in Bismarck, North Dakota. It was in this 2nd-story main. You know how the old mains are with a couple floors. It's like apartments on the top, and they had converted this room up there. And it was a bunch of old people. They smoked cigarettes back then. And there's this old guy. I think it's been long enough. His name was Larry. He had a dog that was like as tall as he was in this chair, and he sat there and smoked cigarettes. And the only way I could see him was to like tilt my head and kind of slide down my chair so I could see under the cloud of smoke to listen to what he was saying. And he was just wild. The things he said was wild. And I'm like, okay, this AA stuff is not for me. And every time I went into treatment, they want you to go to AA. I'd probably had 3 or 4 sponsors that I didn't use before I got into that halfway house. But there's 3 ways you get out of that halfway house. You go to work, you go to the gym, or you go to a meeting. And the real miracle for me, one of the real miracles, is that I stayed desperate longer than normal this time. Usually what happens is I'll be real desperate for about 24 hours till I get some food and sleep, and then I'm like, you know what? I don't have to do all that crazy stuff. I got this. I'll figure out another way, But this time I just stayed desperate. And I remember going down into this AA meeting. It was in the basement of a church. They had those couches that eat you, and you're coming down off of meth, and you're so tired, and you sit down on this couch, and you're like, I'm never getting out of this thing. Never. It's going to take a forklift to get me out of here. And I just sit there, and I don't want to talk. My arms are crossed. My legs are crossed. I am taking up as little space as possible. Which isn't hard because I was 150 pounds at that point. And I just listened. And for the first time in my life at a recovery meeting, they made sense. It was like they were talking to me. And I was just flabbergasted by the things that they were saying. And they were describing the way I felt, except they were smiling and laughing and having a good time. And I just thought, that's too wild. I can tell that they know what I know, what they've seen, what I've seen, but they're happy. And after the meeting, a guy came up to me and asked me if I needed a sponsor. I think this is the way it went down. You had to take all this with a grain of salt. My brain was a puddle of mush. It probably looked like those alphabet ravioli things. It was just garbage. I could hardly string together one coherent thought. So I think this is the way that it happened. In my mind, he came up to me and asked me if I needed a sponsor, and I told him I did. He told me that I needed to call him every day. Now, this is not part of the book, but this is what he asked me to do. He said, call me every day. You're going to read 2 pages out of the book, not 3, not 1, 2 pages. We're going to talk about it every day when you call, and we're going to do the steps. You're going to go to 2 or 3 meetings a week at a minimum. You're going to get a home group that I go to. And if you can do those things and do the steps, you'll get sober. Like, yeah, whatever, man. All right, cool. And so here I am in this halfway house every day calling this guy on like a 6-inch payphone cord. There's a bank of payphones across the wall. 3 out of the 4 would be some guy beating the phone against the wall because his old lady is cheating on him or whatever. And I'm talking to my sponsor all curled up here with all these tough guys, and going through the book. I had a 6-month-old daughter at that time that I didn't really know. My only memory of her before that was watching her crawl around on the dope dealer's carpet, hoping she didn't pick up any shards that were errantly dropped in the shag. She was with her mom, who was at that point still using, and I was hurting. I was hurting big time. I was jealous. I was jealous that she was using. I was jealous that she was out. I was mad that I couldn't see my daughter, and this guy just walked me through all this. We did the first 3 steps, bam, bam, bam. Within a couple months, I got out of the halfway house. All that stuff with my buddy blew over somehow. I was like waiting on the other shoe to drop. It never dropped. And he starts having me do the 4th and 5th step. I'm not going to touch on all the steps, but there's a few that were transformative to me. And making the 4th step was no big deal for 95% of it. And then there were 2 or 3 things that I knew that I think every alcoholic has these, although they're varying degrees of intensity. 2 or 3 things that you pray to God you never get so drunk that you spill the beans on, that you're going to take to your grave no matter what happens. Like, I will do anything, but I'm not telling somebody that. And so I wrote the 95% of this 4th step out, no problem, almost a little proud of some of it. You know, it probably put me in a better light than I deserved. And then we did our 5th step, and the 5th step is where you share basically this with another person. And I had those 2 or 3 things that were what I call game time decisions. Like, maybe I'll tell them, maybe I won't. They're not on paper, so I can get out on this if the mood isn't right. And we do this whole deal on a couch in his basement. I remember he had a dog named Jack, and Jack put his like head on my knee and just looked at me the whole time I'm like saying this thing. And it was cathartic to spit all that stuff out, but I had these things, you know, and at the very end he says, okay, is there anything else? Is there anything else you need to tell me? And I just sit there. My heart's going a million miles an hour. I probably needed to take a shit. I was so scared, so scared. And I jumped. I said, I wore a wire on a guy, and I hate myself for it. Absolutely hate myself for it. And I was waiting on him to just go, you stupid piece of shit. How could you do that? Like, I should shoot you here on the spot. He didn't say any of that. Okay, what's next? I told him about some sexual improprieties that I was ashamed of. He said, okay, anything else? And I just about frickin' melted right there. I said, you're a good guy, man. We all do shit like that. And my jaw probably hit the floor. I'm surprised my chin wasn't bruised from hitting the floor. I was like, what do you mean? I am the worst kind of person you can imagine. He's like, nah, you know, whatever. Still love you, man. No big deal. We all do shit like that. And it's like all these things that I held so tightly that were just eating me inside that I was going to drink or die or kill myself to hide. He's like, yeah, no big deal. Oh, it blew my mind. The sense of relief, that monkey that I had tried so long to get off my back just climbed down my arm and walked away, the little bastard. And I went home, and he told me that, you know, to do the 6th and 7th step and take your book down from the shelf and read this bit, make sure that you had done. I was so relieved. I did it, but it was too much for me. It was too much for somebody to say, I know everything about you and I still think you're a pretty damn good guy. Like, what? That was mind-blowing. I could not cut myself that slack. So the 6th and 7th step played a larger role later in my sobriety. But up next, we started working on amends. And I'm a thief, was a thief, a liar, a cheat. And I had some big amends to make. And so we started knocking them out. And I had one in particular, you know, I robbed gas stations and this and that, and not like gunpoint, but like after hours stuff. And I walked in and told them, you know, hey, I took 45 cartons of cigarettes or whatever it was, and I need to pay you back. And I hadn't adjusted for inflation over that period, and so those 45 cartons of cigarettes were like, holy crap, that was a lot of money. And I paid them back, and those were big deals, but like I had this one house that we had burglarized, and I mean, I had kicked down the door. I took their pillowcase to put all their stuff in. I took their passports when they wouldn't serve me any purpose. I took everything that even remotely looked like it was of value, just because I was a shitty person and I just had a thing for stuff. I mean, God, what a miserable deal. But anyways, I didn't know where this house was. I couldn't find it. And I said, okay, I am willing to do this, but I can't find it. And the sense of relief from not being able to find it. We drove around looking for this house. We couldn't find it. And I kid you not, 2 weeks later, my good old buddy, gets out of prison for the first time. He did his year or whatever. And I work up the courage. All right, man, where is this house? I'm like, please don't remember. Please don't remember. He's like, oh, I know exactly where it's at. He like tells me the address. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So my sponsor and I, within a week or so, we drive up to this. He drives me up to this house. He knew he had to drive me because my ass would probably never do it on my own. And I go up and I knock on this door. And I mean, just thinking about this, I had a daughter. She was probably a year and a half at that point. And I could go to prison. I should go to prison for this. This was like, I got away with it and I was giving myself up dead to rights. It felt so unnatural. And I knock on this door and somebody answers and I'm like shaking like a leaf. I got to take the biggest dump ever. I'm just terrified out of my mind, sweating. I'm probably look like Casper the Ghost standing there. The people freaking moved. Oh, the relief again. A roundabout story. I run into somebody who knows these people like a week later, and I call them. I think got a hold of their son, and I said, I need to talk to your parents, and this is what I did. And he was paused for a minute. He's pissed. He said, all right, gave me his parents' number, and I ended up meeting them at a coffee shop. And I sat down with them, people I had burglarized and took everything from. All their security, getting a passport when you've had it stolen, that's not easy. Getting a social security card, getting a passport without a social security card. I took their wedding rings. I took everything. I opened their safe. And I sat down with them at this little Gloria Jean's coffee shop and said, I burglarized your house. And they were a lot cooler than they had any right to be. They had alcoholics in their family. They were grateful that I came to them, but they also told me what I stole from them that wasn't tangible, that I didn't realize. They told me about the security I stole from them. They asked me where their passports were and if they could feel safe, their identities were safe. And I had to put them at the bottom of the river in a pillowcase. I couldn't promise them that that was the case. And although I did end up paying them back monetarily, I could never pay them back for what I actually stole from them. There are things that we do that we can't completely fix. But I did the absolute best I could with that, and I could sleep at night when I was done. And that was the second big transformation for me when I came into the program and started working these steps, was the feeling of I've done everything I can to make my past right, and all I can do from here on out is the best I can do. And the desire to drink, the desire to use drugs, by that point had completely gone, completely. It used to be that I couldn't see the orange cap of a BD Ultrafine without about dying. I mean, couldn't even see one. If I saw one on the street, I'd go into convulsions. Like I had this obsession, this deep-seated desire. Like I couldn't imagine going the rest of my life, the rest of the day without sticking a needle in my arm. I couldn't imagine going to a wedding without drinking a beer. I couldn't imagine ever enjoying anything in my life again, ever. Camping? Why would you go camping if you weren't going to drink? That's utterly ridiculous. Like everything I did was great as long as I was drinking and high. I couldn't imagine any joy in life, and that whole dilemma had gone away. My wife is a non-alcoholic. I have alcohol in my house every day. She has a bottle of Oxycontin from a surgery 8 years ago, and she has syringes from using Ozempic. I mean, the whole thing is in my house, and I'm aware that they're there, but I don't ever think about them. Never. I mean, it's gone. I never thought I could have that peace of mind. I never thought I could have that freedom. I thought this was going to be a white-knuckle deal the rest of my life. I do not think about getting high or getting drunk anymore. Sometimes I think about sex. Sometimes I think about gambling. Sometimes I let the hole in my soul get a little bigger, and I try to fill it with things that aren't healthy. But as far as drugs and alcohol, it's gone. If I let myself go long enough, I'm sure I could get back there. I'm not cured. But I never expected to have fun, to find joy, to find peace. And I've been given all that stuff. And it didn't happen at year 14. It happened at like year 1. And it's just been getting better ever since. I still suffer from fear. I still do absolutely boneheaded things. I'm still a sufferer of that restless, irritable, and discontent at times. But the program, the 12 steps, the fellowship, the people I've been able to help, the people that have helped me, have made this just a ball game that I can't explain. You have to do it. Alcoholics tend to be overthinkers. I thought somehow, some way I had to figure out a way in my head to outthink this thing. Like if I could just make it make sense, I could get out of like, no, fuck that. But I finally got sick enough that my brain didn't work. They said, do these 12 steps and you will find freedom. And my brain quit working and I just did the 12 steps. This is a program of action. You have to do the action. So if there's one person out there who hears this story and just quits thinking, quits trying to figure it out and just does the frickin' steps with a sponsor, I'll be a happy man.
Thank you, Elias, for telling your story. I really love the part in your story about your amends, how you were almost trying to evade or get a free pass when those people had moved. And I love how God always gives us the opportunity to make those amends, not when we think we're ready, but when He is ready. Thank you for sticking around to the end and listening to the Jaywalkers Recovery Podcast. Please share this episode with a friend. Have a blessed day.